Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's been like 6 months since I've done one of these. Where have I been? Dealing with life. You see, my grandfather has cameoed in a number of videos throughout the years, and many have asked, like, well, is he still doing all right? Because he's got to be getting old. And yes, he is. He is 83 years old. And usually 83-year-olds are kind of sickly or kind of shaky, but he's still doing great. He ended up getting diagnosed with cancer back in November. And so that's what I've been dealing with. Thankfully, it was caught early, and thankfully the chemotherapy allowed him to not die and actually recover, and he's more or less back to normal. He's back to lifting weights and doing all kinds of cool stuff like that. That's one of those things where I do feel a bit blessed by divine providence to have a very healthy family. My family is getting on in years, as I am. I'm 34 now, and so you can imagine how old they are. And they're still kicking ass. And my grandfather, despite having cancer, is still doing his normal stuff. One thing that's kind of neat is when he was getting chemotherapy, I think it was New Year's Eve, he and my grandmother were at the local grocery store, and there were all these people pulling in curbside to get stuff delivered to their car. And here's this 83-year-old man lifting a 50-pound electric scooter from the ground to the van, kind of putting all those much younger people to shame. That was awesome. So now that he's been getting better, I can focus more on videos and streaming and stuff like that. But during that time period, videos were very much on the back burner. And not only because I didn't have a lot of time, but also just because the stress and everything. And so that's why it took so long to get Mass Effect 1 finished. Now, Mass Effect 1 was going to take a long time anyway, but when you got to worry about, well, cancer, it's one of those things where my grandfather and the rest of my family come first and videos come last. It's just one of those things. But he's doing a lot better. He's lifting weights. He's doing all the Gramp stuff. And just recently we went bowling, and he actually did pretty good. So I'm very happy with that. The stress level is going down quite a bit. He's still not 100% well, but we now don't have to worry about any sort of mortality. So there's that. That is where I have been. So enough worrying matters. Let's get on to the videos. Mass Effect 1 took a long time to do because I wanted to do that game a lot of justice. The sad part is the Mass Effect 1 video was actually supposed to be more elaborate than it was. I was actually going to dress up as Commander Shepard. In fact, I was going to film that just a couple weeks ago. I had the Commander Shepard costume on, I had the green screen set up, had the lights, everything. I walk out there, good day! RPGs are one of the most unique forms of beep beep. The fucking SD card died as I said that. And I died a little inside. If I had not been in the living room of this house, I would have likely shouted fuck to the high heavens. Instead, I just kind of had to disassemble everything because I didn't have a spare SD card. And then I realized I had an SD card in my still camera. But even if I had got that bloody thing, it was the wrong kind of SD card, and so it wouldn't have worked. For those who don't know, there's a lot of different types of SD cards. And my camera, my main filming camera, which I have not used for a video in a very long time, just because audio works and it's a lot less setup and everything. That camera is so old, it only takes a certain type of SD card. If you use like a new SD card, it's not going to work in it. There's different SD card types with different transfer speeds and stuff like that. And I actually had to go on eBay to find the specific SD card for that camera. So I might film for Mass Effect 2, maybe. As for Mass Effect 2 and 3, those are going to come out when they come out. It really just depends on everything going on in my real life. I already had the footage recorded for Mass Effect 2 and 3, and I'm going to get started on the script soonish. In addition to Mass Effect, I got some ideas for some ancillary videos. I'm thinking of doing a retrospective of the real Book of Boba Fett, the Boba Fett Omnibus, but once again, I don't know if I'm going to have time for that. I'd like to do that, though, because the Boba Fett Omnibus is really good. it has a lot more in common with Judge Dredd than it does Star Wars. Because in the Boba Fett omnibus, Boba Fett and the rest of the stories kind of act like Judge Dredd stories. There's a lot of satire, there's a lot of dark humor, but it's really bloody good. If that had been the Book of Boba Fett TV show, my God, it would have sold. I also want to do a retrospective of the Republic Commando book series. I'm doing a reread of that, and I'll cover those books a bit more when I get to the book segment of this update vlog. But I'd love to do a retrospective of all 5 books. If that had been The Mandalorian, oh man, that would have sold so much more than Denny Boy did. And also, last but not least, this is one that's going to be a lot easier. I also want to do a video on the West End Games Style Guide, which kind of guided the early Star Wars Expanded Universe. And when you read what they said for writers for the West End Games Style Guide was for the Star Wars West End Games RPG. And this style guide was pretty extensive. And that's just to make an RPG, much less a TV show or a movie. If Lucas, Filoni, and all the rest had actually followed that, we wouldn't have the problems that we do today. You know, when it comes to going back to books like that, you might think like nostalgia. Those were the books I read back when I was a teenager. But the thing is, when I go back to media that I haven't enjoyed in, like, say, a decade, I'm finding myself enjoying it in ways that I didn't when I first read it. When I first read the Republic Commando series by Karen Traviss, I was a teenager. And while I did understand most of what was going on in there, at the time, I hadn't really experienced a lot of the stress that I have today. And so when you read about some of the more high-level shit that goes on in Republic Commando as a kid, it's like, oh yeah, they're in trouble now. Now it's like, oh man, I feel you. I know what's going on when it comes to that. You know, nostalgia is one of those words that really isn't very good anymore. It's like, you just like it because you grew up with it. For me, I've never been like that. I have never really had nostalgia. If something is good today, like it was back then it becomes Alpha Prime. Then it means it's good no matter how many times you enjoy it. But even back in the day, when Star Wars got bad, I stopped liking it. You know, I refused to play Force Unleashed. I did not like Force Unleashed back then, and I still don't. You know, pull it down. I will never let that go. I will never let that go. That was bullshit. Galen Merrick is bullshit. And that's a game from 2007. Some of you weren't even born, and I'm still pissed off by that. Disney, I don't even count. That's just some universe somewhere else. You know, so for me, I don't really care. As bad as that's going to get with Kathleen Kennedy in charge, I don't care. But back in the EU, when Lucas destroyed the EU with that goddamn Force Unleashed, yeah, I was pissed off about that, and I didn't play it. When Mara Jade got killed off by Karen Traviss, oh, I love the Republic Commando books, but I didn't read it. Actually, I did read it, and that's how I knew it became shit. Because back then, I didn't follow the any sort of news, and I still don't, actually. But when they killed off Karen Traviss, I stopped reading the Fate of the Jedi series. Like, in Fate of the Jedi Sacrifice, I stopped at that point and did not finish that book series. I do not believe in nostalgia. If something is good, enjoy it. If something is bad, chuck it straight in the bin. That's one of those things. You know, you gotta appreciate what's good and just discard the bad. You know, don't like something just because it has the Star Wars logo on it. And speaking of the Star Wars logo, one of my recent acquisitions is this epic tome of lore, the new essential guide to chronology, droids, and alien species. I didn't even know this thing existed. I have essential guide to chronology and droids, but not in an omnibus with alien species. I never got alien species. So it's just awesome. I mean, this was the level of I love how it opens up with the luxury droid. I did not do that on purpose. Oh my. Gynocentric indeed. Evil C-3PO. Generic guy. Also generic guy. Oh, this was an interesting character in the Death Star, book series. Or not book series, it's just one book. But there's a techno unit. Oh, there's the Dark Trooper. Yeah, they're dragging that through the mud. But, yeah. It's always good to appreciate the good stuff. That also goes into another topic, ladies and gentlemen. It's like I actually wrote down the bullet points. Am I actually competent? Maybe. But it's always good to appreciate what one has. During this whole cancer crap that's been going on for the last few months, I've come to really appreciate the time I've had with my grandfather. You know, he's been a big part of my life since literally the beginning. One of my favorite memories of my very early childhood is of him and I going, I have a very, very good memory, thankfully. I can remember almost anything. Obviously, I can't remember everything. I don't have like one of those super photographic memories, but I can remember a great many things. And one of my favorite early memories is of riding a bicycle with my grandfather. Like, I was really young. Like, I'm talking like 5 or 6 years old, riding on the back of his like bicycle. I still remember that after all these years. And so, you know, it's always good to appreciate what you do have, because it may not always be there. So, like, a good example of appreciating what I have is just the other day, and we're going to get into this later in the gaming segment. I decided to get back into the Wii, and I dug out the old Wiimotes, and they have been sitting in a box for, I'd say, maybe a decade or more, and the batteries had corroded in one of the Wiimotes. And me and my grandfather worked to get that Wiimote fixed. It's something simple, but I appreciate that more now when there was a scare of what if there is no more Gramps. And that's the thing. You know, it's very easy to take a lot of stuff for granted, but don't, because it may not be there anymore. Enjoy it while it lasts, and hope it lasts forever, but nothing lasts forever. But just enjoy it. Recognize that it may not be there, and just don't take things for granted. I already said that, but I'm starting to sound like a certain vice presidential individual. The idea is that don't just expect things to always be there, and just take a higher level enjoyment in the simple things in life. And speaking of the simple things in life, we're moving down the bullet points. Having hobbies. This is something that's very good for both when you're stressed out about life and when you just want something to do. You know, something beyond just going to work and the same old crap day in, day out. Having something to do. The bullshit statement today is touch grass. Well, you got to do more than just that. You got to have something to look forward to, something to work towards, a goal, and a more immediate goal than, say, you know, you want to be, you know, the biggest YouTuber ever. I don't really want to be, because God, all that scrutiny is not something I want to have to deal with. It's like GeneralLotz said he didn't like this, but did like that. What TF? But yeah, like, having hobbies is a good thing. You know, get out of the old cave now and again. I do recommend a couple hobbies like bowling. Bowling is a nice, cheap hobby that, you know, it does take skill, and it's fun. I mean, it's one of those things where you literally just, you go to a bowling alley, get a ball and a pair of shoes, and you can just start doing it. Some of my other hobbies are somewhat expensive, you know, like collecting models. You gotta have room for that. You gotta know how to paint. You gotta want to paint. And like shooting is like my second favorite hobby these days. Just because it is expensive, you know, like every time you go to shoot, you're burning money beyond just the range fees. But shooting's a good one. Anything that requires you to try to get better as time goes on, because you have something to work towards. Cosplay is also a pretty fun hobby. You know, it's like, can you get the costume to look as close to film accurate as possible, or just make it look good? You know, cosplay is one of those hobbies that I didn't think I'd actually like, but once I started to get into it, you start to notice the little details in the armor. It's like, ooh, can I make this look like that? Can I make that look like that? It's a little thing that goes beyond just the normal bullshit of day-to-day life. And speaking the bullshit of day-to-day life, we're moving down the list again to The Mandalorian Season 3. It just wrapped up today, and I gotta say, the YouTube outrage merchants are going to be like, it was the worst show ever, man. And that's not true. It was the most incomplete show I've seen in a long time. The Mandalorian needed more than 8 episodes. It needed a lot more than that. The big problem with Mandalorian Season 3 is each and every episode felt like it was bits and pieces from like other episodes stitched together so they could go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, with none of the connective tissue in between. And that's where that whole season really just fell apart. It didn't even fall apart. See, the thing is, when I watched that episode today, I was like, this could have been good if there'd been more of it. I mean, the basic plot point of Mandalorian Season 3 is Mando has to get Mandalore back for the Mandalorians. That's effectively what happens in the season. That's not really a spoiler. The problem is, it's just, there's not enough there to justify anything. You have these major emotional events that happen in the show, but there's no build-up. It's just all payoff, but no build-up. It just ejaculates itself upon the screen, and it's like, well, that's cool, but could we have, like, had something before that? You know, and it's... The one episode that people really hated was the one with Jack Black and Christopher Lloyd and that pop star. I think Rizzo was her name. I don't really know who that person was. I had to look it up. I just thought that was a random actress that wasn't very good. I can't normally tell bad acting most of the time because I'm not paying that close attention, but my God, her acting was terrible. I don't know. I don't know why she was even in that show. I mean, why are we hiring pop stars? Like Jack Black and Christopher Lloyd I get, but just a random pop star? But anyway, that episode wasn't even that bad because it actually had connective tissue between what was going on in the episode. The whole idea of the New Republic being dystopian, yeah, that had me screaming at the screen. But then that's promptly forgotten, like in the next episode. It's like, you've got 8. Why did you waste your time on that? Basically, Mandalorian Season 3 really needed to have something like 24 episodes versus 8. Because there was just no connective tissue at all between anything that happened. It could have been good. It just wasn't. It's the same way with Book of Boba Fett. Although Book of Boba Fett's more tragic in that last episode, there's Boba Fett. Where was he the rest of the series? And I'm not even talking about the episodes that were just repurposed from Mandalorian Season 3 either. The thing about Disney Wars now is that there's enough little good bits in it that it really makes it disappointing to watch, because it's like, this could actually be halfway decent if it actually was. But it wasn't. It's just kind of sad, really. I don't really care about that Cassian Andor show. I love that people are like, Star Wars without the Star Wars. Then what do you have? It's like, why don't we have like an AK without the AK? Let's have it be direct gas impingement. Wait a minute, but doesn't it kind of like defeat the purpose of having a Kalashnikov? But anyway, I don't know. Star Wars, is it dead? No. Disney's still $1 billion company. They're still going to put out bullshit, and people are still going to watch it. And they're welcome to it. So now, let's talk about something that's cool. Some pickups, ladies and gentlemen. What we got here is a 3D printed Lawgiver Mark III from the Dread 2012 show. And I gotta say, it's a really cool design for a pistol. Oh no, is it loaded? Or could it be a chunk of 3D printed plastic? Oh my God. I always kind of like the Lawgiver. It doesn't make any sense at all. Because, like, how does he switch between the different ammunition types and have it make any sense? Because, like, look at the size of these bullets. I'm sorry, when you go high X, how does he get, like, let's say he wants to go to high X, and it's hot shot. But he does it on the fly. So, like, he's shooting at the bad guys, you know, and he wants to go immediately to high X. Does he shoot the hot shot round, and then the high X is loaded? Or does, like, the hot shot go back down and the high X comes up? It doesn't really matter. It's just cool. This is actually going to be part of a cosplay costume for the Doomslayer Lorian that I had made. It's pretty neat, though. I kind of like it. Well, I more than kind of like it. It's pretty cool. Let's see. We've also got something that does make a whole lot more sense. We've got the F302. You can pick these up off of eBay. The F302 is from Stargate SG-1. I think it was season 6 that this came out. This is where humanity started actually making their own starfighters based on the Death Glider, the Goa'uld Death Glider. I think this could take down a TIE fighter. Probably not an X-Wing or an A-Wing or any of the Alliance craft, but this would definitely take on a TIE fighter, that's for sure. But I'm quite fond of this little ship. It's very well detailed. 3D printing has come a long way. And then, of course, we have, I'm not removing this from the box, we got Isaac Clarke, which can also be got off of eBay. I like the bag here, though, that looks like, it has like the font that looks a little bit like Kenner. But this is a very nice little resin-printed Isaac Clarke. I've always wanted an Isaac Clarke figure. I don't know how well you can see that here. Just let me take a look here real quick. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's not too much glare coming off there, but I've always liked the Isaac Clarke design. And yes, I'm aware of that remake. I have no interest in playing it. I already played the original. But yeah, apparently he's supposed to glow, but yeah. I might take him out of the bag at some point, but I've always liked the Isaac Clarke design. I've always wanted the NECA Isaac Clarke, but I would never pay, you know, like $150 for an action figure. I might be crazy, but I'm not that dumb. Speaking of action figures, though, there's a lot cheaper. We've got here is my custom painted Clone Trooper. You can pick these off of Etsy as well. Look at that thing. That's really what they should have, but it's really well detailed. Even has a little knife in his boot. His blaster has a sling on it. He's got like a revolver and a holster. It's a really cool design. I had a few other pickups as well, but those are the ones I think are the coolest. All right, so gaming. Dark Forces finally has a source port called the Jedi Engine, and you can also play different mods with it as well. And I've been going through a few of them. I never got into the Dark Forces modding community. In fact, I didn't even know it existed until I learned of the Jedi source port. The Jedi source port's not quite as fancy as the Dark XL, but it does work. That's the important thing. Dark XL, as far as I remember, never worked quite right and never had any sounds in the cutscenes, whereas the Jedi Engine does. So it works pretty good. The mods that I've been playing with it are the Dark Tide mods. They're really bloody good. You've got Kyle Katarn teaming up with Dash Bloody Rendar. Okay? And it's voiced. It's got animation. It's some of the best mods I've ever played. They're hard, and the levels are very much in the vein of Raven Software. They're going to be a little hard to play at first, because the game expects you to be smart, which can kind of be annoying. Although the game does like to screw you. If you use too many of your explosives, guess what? And you save in the wrong place, you got to restart that whole level, because that screwed me a few times. Not the best game design in that regard, I have to say. A more modern game I recommend checking out is Ghost Recon Wildlands. I just randomly picked it up on one of the Steam sales, and it's remarkably good. It's a third-person open-world game, but the gunplay is actually fun. The story is kind of crap, but it's just it's got very good gameplay. Like, there's a lot of missions where you go to an enemy base and you gotta, you know, take out somebody, kidnap someone, blow something up. The traditional stuff, but the gunplay is sufficiently difficult. You go down after just a few hits. You've got a little AI squad that actually is somewhat competent. The enemy can actually hit you. But the thing I like the most about it is the way to really play the game is you use a drone. You use a drone to scout out where you want to attack, and it will pinpoint each individual enemy, because the enemies can actually kind of blend in with the background, and they can kill you fast. And so it's like you got to plan your attack before you attack. And so I just found that to be really bloody fun, and it's a very big game. Once again, the plot, you know, you got to take down some kind of Bolivian drug lord. Apparently Bolivia is actually one of the more stable countries in South America. So it's a traditional Tom Clancy thriller kind of plot. I don't find the plot too annoying. It's not woke or anything. And it's just a nice, fun gameplay game. It doesn't run very well. It's not very well optimized, but still, next Steam sale, I do recommend getting it. I do want to play it multiplayer, because apparently you can play that game co-op, and it should be really fun cooperative. Next thing I gotta recommend is the Dolphin Bar. The Dolphin Bar is a little piece of technology you can plug in your computer that you can hook your Wiimotes into. I was a big fan of the Wii when it first came out. I played the shit out of some Wii games, most notably Wii Sports Resort, when the Wii Motion Plus came out. I thought that was like one of the best designed games for motion controls, because there's a bowling game, going back to bowling, it's, like I said, it's a pretty fun hobby. The bowling game worked really well. You just kind of move the Wiimote like a bowling ball, and it worked great. And so what the Dolphin Bar is, you plug it in your computer, you configure it to work with the Dolphin emulator, and you can be playing Wii games on your PC, so you don't have to have that really fuzzy signal coming out of your Wii. You can also use the Dolphin Bar to use Wiimotes as a light gun. You wouldn't think it, but there's no super cheap light guns out there. I would have thought you could have found like a light gun for like $20. This apparently does not exist. At least not from what I can see. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place, but like every light gun I look at is like $100. With the Dolphin Bar, you can convert a Wiimote into a light gun, and it works really well. The only problem is you cannot hook up two Wiimotes with the Dolphin Bar, you have different modes. Mode 1 is where the Wiimote works like a mouse. Mode 2, it also works like a mouse, but a little bit differently. Mode 3 is where the Wiimote works like a game controller. And Mode 4 is something designed specifically for the Dolphin emulator. It basically makes the Wiimote look like an actual Wiimote to Dolphin. That's good. The only problem is, Mode 2 is the mode you want to use when you want to play light gun games outside of Dolphin. The only problem is you can only hook up one Wiimote that way. Apparently with Mode 3 you can kind of kludge it together, but it is kind of disappointing that you can't do that. There are other solutions to hooking Wiimotes up to the PC, but the Dolphin Bar seems to be the easiest and most reliable way to do it. But yeah, it kind of sucks that if you want to play MAME games, you can only really use one Wiimote that way, and that's cool. And I do plan on live streaming a game where I do that, but if you want to play it cooperatively, you really can't, at least not as far as I can see. Apparently you can do some configuration in RetroArch or Batocera, but just if you want to do it quick and easy, that does not exist for that. The quick and easy thing really is Dolphin, and so there are a few Wii light gun games I do recommend playing. Ghost Squad, really quite a bit of fun. House of the Dead 2 and 3, although House of the Dead 2 and 3 get kind of bullshit. Zombies do like to lunge at you, and you only have a very few hits, so I'm not sure how you'd actually finish that without save states. But those are the two main games I do recommend if you want some light gun games for the Wii. Alright, so, books. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, do I got a lot of books to recommend to y'all today. Now, I've read a lot more than this, but since y'all probably don't want to sit here for too long, although if you're at work, let the day fly by. First and foremost, we've got the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Mistborn is a book series about the titular Mistborn as they try to take down the evil Lord Ruler. It seems like it's going to be super generic, but it's got some great characters, and man, I did not see some of the developments going through there, because I thought it was just going to be a generic a generic fantasy book series, but man, was I wrong. You have a character that starts off literally like at level 0 and it levels up to like, well, I don't want to spoil it. It does have a female heroine, but we don't have any instances of the, it's a new term, but actually I'm not going to use that new term because I find that kind of annoying. You don't have the Mary Sue female character. It might look like she's a Mary Sue, but she does get her ass beat quite a bit. You've got a good number of male characters who do actually get to do things and are actually heroic. It is a very good fantasy series. The less you know about it going in, the better. The magic system makes legitimate sense. And once again, if I try to explain it to where it makes more sense than what I'm going to say here, it'll once again spoil everything. But it's a magic system where, like, they've got these vials of, like, an alcohol solution with metal shavings in it. And, like, if you drink that down and you have specific powers, you can burn the metal to, like, do stuff. Like, if you drink down pewter, you get really strong. You can beat people up easily, smash rocks and stuff like that. If you drink down iron, I think you can push or pull stuff. It's different. Like, a different metal can push and a different metal can pull. It's really well thought out. And spoiler alert, the good guys do eventually win because there's a sequel series called Wax and Wane, which is set in the future. The less I tell you about that, the better, but think of like BioShock, but there's more than just one or two magic users. I like it more because we have a protagonist that I like more than the main characters from Mistborn. He's basically, think of magic Sherlock Holmes cowboy. And that's the Wax character. It's really bloody cool in that book. I haven't actually fit it in those books. That's another, I think it's a quadrilogy. I've only read the first two, but damn, they're good. And once again, I can't really tell you anything about it because if I do, it will spoil literally everything. But I highly recommend those two series. I'm not a big Brandon Sanderson fan. I find most of his work to be really boring, but Mistborn and its sequel series, quite good. Next one I recommend is Babylon 5's book called To Dream in the City of Sorrows by Catherine M. Drennan. Now, Babylon 5 is a television series that kind of competed with Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It was set on a space station. It had this big war, you know, that sort of thing, although it can be arguably DS9 ripped off Babylon 5. There was a whole big lawsuit sort of thing. But anyway, the book itself is an explanation of what happened to Babylon 5's first commander, Jeffrey Sinclair. Now, if you don't know anything about Babylon 5, just do a quick Google search to get yourself, you know, caught up. But the first commander of Babylon 5 is Jeffrey Sinclair. Well, he disappears in between season 1 and season 2. And that's because the actor, whose name I cannot remember, basically suffered from schizophrenia. Well, he didn't basically, he did suffer from schizophrenia. And, well, he was kind of going nuts. And so he had to leave the show. Well, in season 3, I think, or maybe later season 2, he shows back up again as the leader of the Space Rangers. Actually, just the Rangers, which are a group of people that fight the Shadows, which are the main villain of the show. They don't explain how he became that, and you just kind of got to go with it. Well, this book explains how he became the leader of the Rangers and what happens to him. It's a pretty well done book. It's one of those things where that is supposed to be canon to the series. Very few series outside of Star Wars kept canon that closely. And sadly, I think Babylon 5 is going to end up getting remade, which is going to be crap. So moving on from Babylon 5, we've got Out of the Dark, which is a fanfic by a writer whose name I no longer remember, but just type in Out of the Dark fanfic and you should find it. Out of the Dark is a Warhammer 40k fanfic where a planet from the dark age of technology goes through the warp into the future of Warhammer 40k. It's pretty long, but it's fairly readable. The only problem I have with the Out of the Dark fanfic is there's a lot of fanfickiness to it. Like, for example, you have the Slayers, which slay demons, and they say rip and tear a lot. It's got some fairly decent characters. Some of the Primarchs are done a little differently. The main character is Perturabo, but that's not the one that you're thinking of. It's the guy that Perturabo was named after. The only problem is they spend a lot of time in the warp, and we don't actually get to see them interact with the 40k universe all that much. So it's kind of annoying, but it's still worth reading just because it's kind of cool to see humanity kicking ass. Next, we've got Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant. Now, I had to look this person up. Apparently, Mira Grant is a young adult fiction writer. I did not know that. Rolling in the Deep is a book I randomly came across. It was a novella, I should say, that I randomly came across about killer mermaids. And, well, the Killer Mermaid book is kind of entertaining. Basically, there's this ship that is owned by the Not Discovery Channel. They go looking for mermaids, and they find them, and the mermaids are well, they're not really evil, but they do eat people's faces, so I guess you could say that's evil. Still, though, fairly interesting characters, fairly interesting premise of, well, killer mermaids. Do recommend. Republic Commando again. Man, Republic Commando's good. I'd forgotten how good that book series was. It got a lot of hate after Karen Travis killed off the fan-favorite character of Mara Jade, but I still liked it even back then. I like to think that Karen Travis kept me in the EU just as soon as even though she wanted to kick me out of it. Republic Commando has, I think, 5 books. Let me see. We've got Republic Commando Hard Contact, Republic Commando 000, True Colors, Order 66, and 501st. Oh yeah, you know a book series is good when you can remember them all off the top of your head. So, Hard Contact is just Omega Squad. Delta Squad does not show up. Omega Squad has different characters, different personalities. They're much more developed than the Delta Squad characters, and I happen to like them a little bit more. Book 2, Book 2, 000, we've got Delta Squad, we got Omega Squad. Sev gets a lot of really good characterization and makes that disappearance at the end of Republic Commando even more painful. It's cool to see them getting together, but that's not the only characters that are introduced. We're introduced to a Jedi character that is more Mandalorian than not. We are introduced to a Mandalorian character, the character I consider to be the Mandalorian, Cal Skirata, who has sons that are null arcs. Null arcs are advanced recon commandos that are a little messed up, so to speak. He's sufficiently dark, but he's also sufficiently good. He's not an anti-hero, but he's a troubled hero. And he will persist throughout the entire rest of the series. The difference between Hard Contact and Trip Zip, oh man, it becomes a completely different series starting in Trip Zip. If you don't like Cal Scarata, if you don't like Weyland Vu, if you don't like any of those people, man, you're not going to like it. Because Delta Squad and Omega Squad, they're not the main characters. It is Cal Scarata and Barda Jusik and Etain Turmercan all the way down. Triple Zero, though, is my favorite because we've got more Omegas and Deltas. I like Cal Scarata, but I also like the Deltas and Omegas quite a bit, so it's cool to see him. True Colors is one of the most emotional ones. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on in there. I don't want to spoil it too much. Once again, Cal Scarata is going to be pretty much your main character throughout that entire book. But Delta Squad does have some... Delta Squad is a minor characters in it. The writer, Karen Travis, really likes to go and focus on Sev, which is very cool. Order 66, oh man, Order 66 is how that should have been done. I love that book because it shows Order 66, the fall of the Republic, from the little guy's perspective, not from the Jedi perspective, but the little guy's perspective. And, you know, one of the complaints about Karen Travis is they like to say that she hates on the Jedi, but loves the Mandalorians. Well, that doesn't really happen when you read the books. The Mandalorians are shown to be both good and bad. The Jedi are seen to be both good and bad. And a lot of the complaints that Karen Travis has are the same complaints that a lot of other people had. But I guess since she's the one that said it, it's bad or something. And 501st is very sad because we never got a follow-up to it. You know, it's after Order 66. There's a lot of really cool developments in it. But pay disputes and Dave Filoni ensured that we did not get a proper sequel. It's just one of those things that even though the Republic Commando series never actually ends, I still read it periodically from time and again. Next, we've got something much more modern. That's End in the Death, Book 1 of the Siege of Terra subseries of Horus Heresy. It's pretty bloody good. We get to see some perspective from the Emperor. Also, that's by Dan Abnett. We get to see perspective from the Emperor. We get to see a lot of weird chaos crap going on. We got some scenes from Horus's perspective where he's going nuts. Or is he? We also see some perspective stuff from Rogel Dorn where he's going nuts. I'm looking forward to the sequel to that. We got another fanfic, Exciting Opportunities of an Unusual Nature. It's the first of a number of Mass Effect fanfics I decided to read since I was working on Mass Effect. Basically, it's where a rogue trader goes to the Mass Effect universe. It's not bad. The writing's a little rough in places. It's a little bullshitty in places where, like, the portal to the other universe, you can go back and forth however much you want, which I think is really dumb. You need to seal that shut, because then it's like, well, aren't, like, all the Space Marines going to invade and kill everyone? Still, though, Shepard in this is you find in a lot of Mass Effect fanfics that Shepard is mostly female, and in this, Shepard is female, and it takes place during the events of Mass Effect 2, and and just about every fanfic I found takes place during Mass Effect 2. There's no male Shep. It's gynocentric, man. Another fanfic is Last Heresy. It's a combination of Mass Effect and 40K, but where the whole universe is combined, where you have the Imperium fighting against the Citadel Council. It's a bit rough, too. It never had an ending, and it ended where, like, the Primarchs were fighting against the Reapers. It was really good. The elusive man was Malcador the Sigilite, and it was one of those things that hasn't been followed up in a decade. Next, we got Legacy of Herat by Larry Niven. Basically, you got space colonists land on a planet, dragon griblets come out of the ground and start killing everybody. Pretty good. And by pretty good, I mean really good. The characters are very 70s. You'll know what I'm saying when you read it. I tried to read some of the sequels, but some of the 70s writing just was a little... Not everything from the 70s really lasted all that well, and it's definitely one of those new age of science fiction books. One of my problems with hard science fiction like Legacy of Herat is just the fact that it does come off as a little bit pretentious, but it's still pretty good nonetheless. Then we've got Ghostmaker. I hadn't reread Gaunt's Ghost Book 1 in probably 10 or 15, good God, years. Hadn't read it since I was a teenager. Gaunt is a really cool character. The overall plot, very good. It's a very well-directed plot. There's a lot of little bit of intrigue here and there. It does a great job. If you want to get into Warhammer 40K, my recommendation is always Eisenhorn and the first couple books of Gaunt's Ghosts. It gives you a nice broad overview with understandable characters and understandable plots. And last but certainly not least, we've got Doomsday Clock. This is a graphic novel that is the sequel to Watchmen. Now, Watchmen was made part of the mainline DC universe at some point. I forget when it was. It's basically where Dr. Manhattan ended up in the DC universe somehow. And, well, this is the follow-up. And even though it came out in 2008, the wokeness is limited. They, of course, did make Rorschach Moracisms, even though he never really came off as Moracisms in either the comic or the movie, but whatever. And the comic's very well written. It has some very good characters. Adrian Veidt is up to his old tricks yet again. I don't really want to spoil it, though. Up to it, and basically, it's the best part about Doomsday Clock is this: it respects both the DC characters and the Watchmen characters, although they kind of shat on the comedian a bit, and it just turned out really well. The art style is pretty good. I do recommend checking out if you were a big fan of the original Watchmen comic. So live streaming. Depending on how much time I have, I'm going to live stream Alien 3 The Gun, whereupon I'm going to be using an actual light gun to play that game. I've actually played that game a little bit with the actual remote light gun, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. So I definitely look forward to doing that when I finally get a chance. Good God, we've been going on a long time, ladies and gentlemen. So last bit, the depressing bit. Thoughts on current politics. Everything's going nuts, but it's been going nuts for a very long time. Politics was something that a great many people ignored for a very long time. I was always fairly politically aware, pretty much since I was a teenager. I just paid attention to what was going on. I never bought into the propaganda that was put out even back then, although it wasn't nearly as bad as it was today. Take something like Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart today is just your typical corporate shill. But back about 15 years ago, he actually would call out both sides of the political aisle. That was good, but you would never see that again today. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to politics, disconnect now and again. Have some idea of what's going on, but do not spend all your time doom scrolling. That is not healthy for your mind or your body. Having too much stress, not good. And realistically, the malefic elements, let's say, of society want you to be depressed all the time. If you're depressed, if you're stressed out, you're much easier to control because you'll be thinking less. Fear, as Dune would say, is the mind killer. So just recognize what's going on, calm down, take a deep breath, and just kind of live your life as best you can. If you live in a bad city, save up money, try to leave. I recognize that not everybody can leave their shithole cities. It's just one of those things. I always hate it when some of these rather snobbish political commentators are like, oh, these people voted for this. Some people did, some people didn't. Some people can't leave because, well, moving costs money. You got to have a job. You got to find some place to live. It's very easy for someone who lives in a safe city and a nice place to live with a job to say, well, why don't you just move? Well, you gonna pay for it? But with that in mind, yeah, stuff is going nuts. But this is the end result of pretty much the last 30 years of political development. A lot of this crazy stuff that's going on in colleges was going on 30 years ago back in the 1990s. And it's just continuously gotten worse because nobody stood up against it. Is the Bud Light boycott going to make much of a difference? I don't know. It's just a beer. And, there's a lot more stuff going on than just beer, but it's interesting to see nonetheless. Speaking of that, I was well aware of the massive amount of controversy that went on with the Hogwarts Legacy game release. Now, I'm not a big fan of Harry Potter. In fact, I didn't even like Harry Potter when I was a kid. It's interesting to see that playing a video game today is a political act. Used to be playing a video game, I guess, although I never was around any of these people, made you look nerdy or stupid, but everybody I ever talked to from my youngest age to my oldest age was a gamer, so I never really saw that. But now gaming is a political act. If you play the wrong game, you'll be attacked. It's crazy, but once again, this is nothing new. These kind of cancel mobs, these kind of Twitter mobs, they've existed in one form or another for the last 30-odd years. It's disgusting to see, but it's not surprising to see. a lot of this crazy crap that's been going on has been with us for some time. It's just now in the era of social media, do we actually see it? So just relax as best you can. Try to live your life the best you can. Keep informed. Keep informed. Make up your own mind. Don't let propaganda control your life. Actually study things from different perspectives. And remember, every side has reason to lie to you. Every side. Finding the truth is your responsibility. So with that in mind, I'm GeneralLotz, and I'm wishing you good Ghost Recon Wildlands and good Wii Sports Resort, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.